Hilchos Temidin Umusafin Perek Shvi, the laws of the daily and additional services in the temple, chapter 7. First 6 chapters of these laws were about the daily services. Today we begin to move on to the additional services. Additional means things that were added to the daily service in the temple on special days. And guess what? Today is Rosh Chodesh, the new month of Elul, and we're going to be learning about Rosh Chodesh. The Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, the extra sacrifice that was on Rosh Chodesh, which by the way is the reason that we daven today Musaf, the extra prayer, is because of the extra sacrifice. And then we're going to also talk about Pesach and all the extra offerings that are connected with Pesach. First of all, the Musaf of Pesach, and second of all, the Korban Omer, the Omer offering on the second day of Pesach, for which we have today the mitzvah of Sfirat HaOmer. The counting of the Omer is the count of the 7 weeks between the second day of Pesach and Shavuos, which we'll learn about the details today as well. So the Rambam begins with Rosh Chodesh. Halacha Aleph, B'Rosh Chodashim, on any new month, Makrivin Musaf Rosh Chodesh, Achar Tamid Shel Shachar. We offer a Musaf, an additional sacrifice for the new month, after the morning sacrifice. B'Kamahu Musaf Rosh Chodesh, how many animals is the additional sacrifice for Rosh Chodesh? Parim Shnayim, B'Ayil Echad, B'Shiva Kvasim, HaKoil Eilos. 2 bulls, 1 ram, 7 sheep, all burnt offerings, Usi'ir Izim Chatas, and a goat for a sin offering. So you see them all here lined up. These are the 2 bulls up here. Here's the ram, 7 sheep, he's holding them, and this guy's holding the goat. So this is the classic Korban Musaf. And the Rambam says, I'm not even going to go into how to offer them. The procedure for performing all the burnt offerings is all the same. Just like the way you're supposed to offer the morning sacrifice. Because every burnt offering is offered in the same way. It doesn't matter if it's a bull or a ram or a sheep. The only difference is in the nesachim, in the accompanying libations, flour, wine, and oil, how much you brought, depended on if it's a bull or a sheep or a ram. But how you offer the actual sacrifice makes no difference. And the procedure of offering the sin offerings, both the ones of the new month and the ones of the holidays, which we're going to be exploring in the next few chapters, is all offered in the same way as any sin offering that was eaten. There were 2 types of sin offerings. Sin offering which are eaten and ones which are burnt. They have a little bit of variation how you bring them. These ones are treated like the eaten sin offerings. And that's for Rosh Chodesh. But Pesach, says the Rambam on Pesach, all 7 days of Pesach, Makrivin Korban Musaf B'chol Yom, Yemorishon Adei Mashvi, we offer an additional sacrifice every day, from the 1st to the 7th day. Of course, outside of Israel we have 8 days, but in Israel 7 days of Pesach, Kim Musaf Rosh Chodashim, by the exact number of the additional offering of Rosh Chodesh. Same picture. Parim Shnayim, B'Ayil Echad, B'Shiva Kvasim Hakol Eilos, 2 bulls, 1 ram, 7 sheep, all burnt offerings, Usi'ir Chatas HaNe'acheles, and the eaten goat, sin offering. And that's the Musaf, the daily Musaf. Then there's another special sacrifice, the Omer. Yom Sheni Shel Pesach Shu Yom Shisha Asar B'Nisan. On the 2nd day of Pesach, the 16th of Nisan, Makrivin, Yesed al Musaf Shel Kol Yom. We offer, in addition to the additional offering, already being brought every day, we add a Keves Le'oila, Im Omer HaTnufa, a sheep, as a burnt offering, with the wave offering of the Omer. Which is one of the communal mincha offerings, flower offerings of the community, as we explained. And today is the chapter for dealing at length with the Omer offering. Halacha daled uzmane kavua. Its time is set. This is one of those sacrifices that you have to bring on a certain day. And therefore it overrides Shabbos and impurity. If the 2nd day of Pesach comes out on Shabbos, can't happen today in our calendar, but it used to be able to happen when the Rosh Chodesh was set by the moon sighting. If the 2nd day of Pesach is on Shabbos, you still offer the offering. Even if all the Kohanim are impure, you still offer the offering. Halacha hey, ein mevi'in min chazu ela me'eretz Yisrael. This special offering can only be brought from Israel, local barley. Shenemar, as it says, B'havesem es oimer reishis kitzirchem el hakoyin. You have to bring an oimer, that's a measurement of grain, from the first of your harvest to the kohen. And it calls it kitzirchem, your harvest. And therefore we learn from there that it has to be your, meaning local. And the truth is, you can learn it from the earlier words in the verse, which say clearly Israel. It says, Ki savayu ala aretz asher nisan lechem, when you come to the land, uktzartem es kitzira, and you harvest its harvest. But the Rambam, at least in most versions, brings the latter half of the verse, where it's kitzirchem, your harvest, because this intimates two details. First of all, it has to come from Israel, and second of all, it has to be yours, which means mitzvasei lavei min hakarev. The mitzvah is that it should come from the close grain. Right outside Jerusalem, if you can get barley from right nearby, that's the mitzvah. If it couldn't come from a close place, then you bring it from any place in Israel, and that was also fine. Very interesting. This is one of those night mitzvahs. Most mitzvahs apply by day. This mitzvah was done by night. The night going into the 16th of Nisan, even on Shabbos. Set time. Any communal offering with a set time even overrides Shabbos. All night is kosher for harvesting of the Omer. Anytime from nightfall all the way till dawn. If they did it by day, they weren't supposed to, but they did it by day, it's still kosher. The mitzvah is that it should come from standing grain. In other words, you should be cutting it for the mitzvah. If they didn't find any still standing grain, everything was already cut, then you can bring from grain that's already been gathered into piles. The mitzvah is to come from fresh grain. If it was a bad year, the grain didn't grow well, there was a lot of wind blast and ruined the quality of the grain, you can bring from dry grain, that's also fine. It says the Rambam halacha yud, darkan haya lahavi misades shebadarim. They used to, typically, even though, again, the last couple of halachas are the ideal mitzvah, the Rambam says practically the Jews used to bring from the fields in the south of Israel, and they treated these fields with extra care. Hayanar chatzi asada, v'zoireya chatzia, b'shanazu. 1 year, nar means to plow, lacharosh. They used to plow half the field and only plant the other half of the field. Uv'shana acheres nar chatzi asada shazara, v'zoireya hachatzi shanar. And the next year they used to plow the field, or the half that they planted last year, and plant the part that they plowed last year, umevim mimenu, and bring from that part. So there was a specific field or fields that were designated for the Omer, and they were always given this extra care, only being planted partly each year to allow the ground to replenish itself with the nutrients and be a more healthier soil, thereby producing even better quality grain. And now the Rambam gives us the whole order of the harvesting of the Omer, a very interesting Jewish ceremony. This Omer used to come from barley, even though it doesn't say barley in the Torah. This is a halacha we received from Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai. How was the procedure performed? Already on the day before the holiday. This is the second day of Pesach, so 2 days before, on Erev Pesach, the agents of the court would go, and they would find the grain that they're going to harvest, and they would wrap it while it's still attached to the ground. You see over here? The grain is still standing, and it's already bound with a little knot. Because we want to minimize whatever melacha, whatever work we can do less on the holiday itself, we try to do that. So before the holiday they come, they encircle all the grain with a rope or whatever it is, it's tied down, so it should be easy to cut. And then all the cities nearby would gather. So it should be harvested with great fanfare. A lot of 3. They would harvest 3 se'ah, that's a dry measurement, of barley, but with 3 people, in 3 boxes, using 3 different sickles. Here they have, right, you see this guy here is holding 1 sickle, he's the second guy holding a second sickle, and this guy you can't see him, he's also holding a 3rd sickle, and they each have a box, and they're each going to cut 3 se'ah, or 1 se'ah per box. Kevan shechashecha. Once it got dark, right, they all came there the day before, and it was the first day of Pesach. First day of Pesach into evening, they're all kind of waiting there. As soon as it becomes dark, Omer lahem hakoitzer l'chol ha'imdim sham. The person who was going to harvest, or really as the commentaries say here, all 3 of the people that were selected to harvest, they would ask, Ba Hashemesh, has the sun set? Oimrim leihein. Everybody would say, yes. Ba hashemesh, he'd ask again. Did the sun set? Oimrim leihein. Yes. Ba hashemesh, oimrim leihein. Yes. Everything was 3 times. The Rebbe has a more of a mystical explanation why everything is to do with 3. 3 is a very geula number. It's a redemption number. And this kind of represents, in some ways, the geula. So we want to connect it to 3. Everything with 3. All the questions were asked 3 times. Everything is 3. Then they would lift the sickle and they would say, Magol zeh. Is this a sickle? Oimrim leihein. Yes. Magol zeh. Oimrim leihein. Magol zeh. Oimrim leihein. Each time. Yes, yes, yes. Kupazu. Is this a box? Oimrim leihein. They would say to him, yes. Kupazu. Is this a box? Oimrim leihein. Yes. Kupazu. Oimrim leihein. Yes. V'imaya Shabbos. If it was Friday night, we have to make clear that we're doing this mitzvah even though it's Shabbos. So he would confirm with the people. Oimrim, he would say, Shabbos hayom. Is it Shabbos today? Oimrim leihein. They would say, yes, and we're still doing the mitzvah. Shabbos hayom. Oimrim leihein. Shabbos hayom. Oimrim leihein. Ve'achar kach, and afterwards, Oimrim, he would ask them again 3 times. Ekzer. Should I cut? Should I harvest? Ve'in Oimrim leikzer. They would say harvest. Ekzer. Ve'in Oimrim leikzer. Ekzer. Ve'in Oimrim leikzer. Shalish pa'amim al kol davar v'davar. 3 times everything. Now, besides the mystical reason, there's a halachic reason. The kol kach lama. Why did we make such a big deal out of this ceremony? Everything 3 times, everything confirming, everything announcing. Says the Rambam, mipnei elu hatoyim sheyatzu miklal Yisrael b'bayis sheni. It's because of those people who were mistaken, that left the Jewish people in Second Temple times. This is a reference to the Tzaddukim, the Sadducees, who did not believe in the oral tradition. And they wanted to interpret every word in the written Torah literally. So if you look in the Torah, it says that they should do this procedure of the Omer Mimocharas HaShabbos, on the day after Shabbos. What's Shabbos? Literally, the 7th day of the week. So the Rambam says, Shehein Oimrim, they say, these mistaken Sadducees say, Shezeh shenemar b'Torah, Mimocharas HaShabbos, Hu Shabbos Bereshis. That when it says the day after Shabbos, it means the Shabbos of creation. In other words, they didn't believe that the Omer was offered on the 2nd day of Pesach. They said, find the first Shabbos in that arena, and on Sunday, you bring this offering. It's always brought on Sunday. We have tradition straight from our sages, from Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai, from Hashem, that this is not referring to a regular Shabbos, it's referring to Yom Tov, it's referring to holiday. And Mimocharas HaShabbos means the day after the holiday. In Israel, the holiday is only 1 day, so the day after the holiday is 2nd day of Pesach. That's how we interpret the verse. The Cheinro, Tamid, Hanavim, Vasanhedrin, B'Cholder V'der. We have, this is not like just some interpretation or hearsay. This was witnessed every single year. All of our prophets, all of our Sanhedrin, constantly in every generation saw Shahayu Menifin Nesa Omer B'Shisha Asar B'Nisan. Bein B'Chel, Bein B'Shabbos. They used to wave the Omer offering on the 16th day of Nisan, whether it's weekday or Shabbos. Furthermore, says the Rambam, I could even prove it to you from the verses. Because it says, V'Harinemar Bar Torah, it says in the Torah, V'Lechem V'Kali V'Charmel Lo Yisaychlu Ad Etzem Hayom Hazeh. Until the day that the Omer offering is waved, no Jew can eat bread or toasted grain or moist grain from the new harvest. Ad etzem hayom hazeh means until this day, the 2nd day of Pesach, when the Omer is offered. And look at this verse. In the book of Yehoshua, right after the Jews came into Israel, it says, V'nemar, it's written, V'yoichlu me'avur ha'aretz, they ate from the produce of the land, Mimacharas ha'pesach, here it's clear, the day after the holiday of Pesach, Matzois v'koloi. They ate them in matzah breads, toasted grain. All the Jews were eating the new grain the day after Pesach, 2nd day of Pesach. So if you're going to say that year it happened to be, that Passover came out on Shabbos, as the fools imagine. So first of all, that Rambam already alludes to the fact that they're wrong by writing the word dimu. Dimu means they imagine, because according to our calendar, Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Friday or on Shabbos. 7th of Adar, when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, was Friday or Shabbos. Which means, if you do the math, that Pesach had to be either Tuesday or Wednesday. So for sure, the day after the first day of Pesach is not Shabbos. But even if you want to follow that logic, as these fools imagine, Heyach tola hakasuv heter achilasam lechadash bedavar she'eino ha'ikar. How could the Torah depend the permission of their eating of the new grain in something which is not the main thing? V'lo hasiba, and not the cause, ela nikra, rather it happened to be. If Shabbos is the real deal, then the verse in Joshua shouldn't say they ate the day after Pesach. It should say they ate the day after Shabbos, because that was the main thing according to the Tzedukim. Since the verse in Joshua makes a point to mention that it was the day after Pesach, hadavar barur shemacharas haPesach hi ha'ila hamateres hasachadash. It's clear now that the concept of being the day after Pesach, that's the cause that allows the chadash to be eaten. We don't care what day of the week it falls out on, and the fact that Torah says mimacharas haShabbos, by tradition we learn that it means the day after the day of rest of Pesach in this case. At any rate, after asking all these questions and confirming all these things, Katzruhu unasanu bakupais. Yud Beis says that Rambam, they used to harvest the grain, put it into the boxes, vehavi'u la'azara, and they brought all the grain into the temple courtyard. Usually this area was for sacrifices, but here they have a whole bunch of grain going on. V'chavtuhu, and they beat it. Apparently part of the pre-sorting of grain process was beating it. Here's a picture of a guy even doing this today. They actually take all the grain into a massive stock and they beat it onto these different surfaces, and it helps the chaff and the kernels separate. So they beat the grain, v'zaydin, and they used to winnow it. That's where you throw it to the wind and let the wind separate the chaff from the kernels. Ubaydirin, and they would select the best kernels, the loikhines hasoidin, then they take the barley corns, the actual kernels, umehavhavin oisei bu'ur, and they would toast them or scorch them lightly on the fire, be'abuv menukav, in a cylinder or in a utensil with holes. This is how it's depicted by many authorities. A little fire under over here, a little bowl on top with holes. They dropped all the barley corns into here, toasted it with a fire underneath. We want the fire to catch to all of them, at least a little bit. Shenemar, because it says, when describing the Omer offering, Aviv means the spring, but it means in this context new grain, fresh grain. Kolui ba'esh, toasted in fire. Geras Carmel, crushed in its state of being new. In tradition, even though in the verses this is talking about different flour offerings, we learn from Moshe Rabbeinu that this verse is talking about the Omer offering. Minchas Bikurim, the mincha of the first fruit, means the first barley that's offered on Pesach. After you toast it lightly, they would spread it out in the azara, in the temple courtyard, and allow the wind to blow through it, so that again it could be even more refined. We do many, many steps to refine the flour to the ultimate extent. Then we place it in a mill that's usually used for grinding beans, small beans. And we grind the 3 se'ah of kernels well. And from the entire quantity, we want to end up with 1 isarin after having been sifted 13 times. Whatever remains, all the extras that are not included in the final product, can be redeemed from the temple property, and anybody can eat it. V'chayav b'chala, it's even obligated to separate challah if you make a dough out of it. Upater min ha'maiser is commercial barno, but it's exempt from tithing, as we explained. Anything belonging to the temple, when it goes into the state of obligation for maiser, even if it's redeemed later, doesn't have that obligation. But that's the rest. Whatever we do have, whatever we remain with, we take this isarin of flour, of barley flour, mix it into a log, small amount of oil, on the 16th of Nisan, and we add to it some frankincense, like every other mincha, and you wave it. You wave it in the eastern side of the temple courtyard. Like we always wave, forward and backward, upward and downward. Umagisha, and then you bring it close, touch it to the corner of the altar. To the southwest corner. Remember the sign? See Southwest Airlines? That's the way to remember. It's the southwest corner, which is over here. This is the southwest corner, because the west is where the temple structure is, and this is the south side. The kaimitz umaktir, then you take some kmitza, 3 fingers full from the flour, and you offer it. And the rest is eaten by the kohanim like any other leftover flour offering. And I say, when do we do the kmitza? When do we exactly offer it? After bringing the musaf of the day, it's Pesach, so the bulls and the ram and the sheep and the goats, and the extra sheep for the burnt offering, just before the afternoon sacrifice, that's when we actually offer the Omer offering. So if you think about it, it kind of spreads over a full day. The harvesting is done at night. All the preparation of the flour is done later, and then in the daytime they actually offer it. Halacha Yud Gimel Aser Liktzar be'Eretz Yisrael min mechameshas min tvua kaidem liktzir asa Omer. Before the Omer is harvested, it's forbidden for any other Jew to harvest any type of grain in Israel. Shenemar, because it says, same verse as before, Reishis Kitzirchem. Where's the verse here? Reishis Kitzirchem. This has to be, the Omer has to be the beginning of your harvest. Sheyiyah Tchila L'chala Niktarim, which should be the first of anything harvested. Which grain are we talking about? If it's a harvest which could technically be the base for the Omer offering. But let's say a field which fully relies on irrigation, and it's in a valley, which is not good quality, since anyways the Omer offering cannot be brought from it, you could harvest it before the Omer is brought, but don't make it into a grain pile. If grain took root before the Omer was brought, the fact that the Omer was brought permits it now. It's considered this year's produce. But if it didn't even take root by the time Pesach came, you cannot harvest it or eat it till the next year's Omer offering, because it's considered part of next year's grain, and only the Omer next year will permit it. If you have grain which began to grow, it didn't produce a third yet. Mutter liktzar mimena, or it didn't reach a third of its growth yet. Mutter liktzar mimena lahachil behema, you can cut a little bit of it to feed to your animals. The kaitzin mipnei anatiyah shalei yipastu, you can also harvest a little bit if it's going to damage other saplings. The kaitzin lefanes makan lebesa evel lebesa medrash, you can also harvest if you need to clear some space to create a mourner's area or a study area. Shenemar kitzir chen v'lei kitzir mitzvah. It says that's the beginning of your harvests. But if it's a mitzvah harvest, then that's fine. Even in these last scenarios, where it's permitted to harvest, do not form the bundles, the proper bundles of grain as harvesters do. Leave them in smaller bundles, just to show that you're still giving some kind of differential respect to the Omer. Halacha Yud Zayin, Kvar Bi'arnu, we already explained. That nothing can be brought in the temple before the Omer is brought. No flour offerings, no flour to accompany other offerings, no first fruits of barley. Nothing can be brought from the new grain before the Omer is brought. The heavy puzzle, if you brought it, it's disqualified. Ideally, you should even wait till Shavuos, when we bring, as we'll discuss tomorrow, the 2 breads from wheat, not barley. You should actually wait to bring any new flour offerings until then, heavy kosher. But if you brought it, it's kosher. So if you brought it before the Omer on Pesach, it's disqualified. Brought it before Shavuos, it's still kosher after the fact. Very interesting. A Jew who would bring a new offering from his new grain, make shechianu. It's a joyous occasion, comes once a year. You make shechianu upon bringing your new offering. You test tvua shezra achar shekara va'omer uktzara achar shekara va'omer shel shana haba'a. What if you planted grain after the Omer was offered, but you only harvested that grain after the next year's Omer was offered? Okay, so you have Omer of, let's say, 5784. You planted the grain right after that, but you only harvested it the next year after the Omer of 5785. The question now is, can you bring from this grain initially before the Shavuos holiday? Because again, in every regular year, you should wait ideally till after Shavuos. Here, since it was planted the last year and only harvested now, do you have to wait till Shavuos? It's a doubt. Since, practically speaking, the grain was in the ground while the 2 breads were brought last year already. And so it's already been passed over by an offering of Shtei HaLechem and the Omer. Or maybe we can only bring it after these two procedures pass over it in order. After it's in the ground, while there's a cutting of the omer, and then the offering of the two breads. Similarly, if you have grain in the ground, and it already began to bud or sprout by the time they brought the two breads on Shavuos, it's a doubt. Are these budding or sprouting considered like taking root? And now you could bring flour offerings from them? Or maybe it's not called taking root and you cannot. So therefore, in both of these scenarios, ideally you shouldn't bring it. If you did, it's been atoned. In other words, it's good, it's kosher. If you do transgress the prohibition and you harvest grain before the offering of the harvesting of the omer, you don't get lashes. Kosher, and what you harvested is kosher. And now, on the theme of the omer offering, the Rambam talks about another mitzvah related to the omer. Mitzvah saseh, it's a positive commandment. Lipskier sheva shabbos tmimos, that every Jew should count 7 complete weeks from the day that the omer is brought. Shenemar, as it says, usfartem lachem macharas haShabbos, you should count for yourselves from the day after Shabbos, meaning the day that you bring the omer. Sheva shabbos is for 7 weeks. Umitzvah limnes hayamim im hashavuos. When you count, you should count both the days and the weeks. Shenemar, because it says tisperu chamishim yom, you should count 50 days. There's 2 expressions: 7 weeks and days. Yeah. That's why we do both, right? We say today is 13 days to the omer, which is a week and 6 days. Right? We mentioned the weeks and the days. Umitchilas hayom, we count from the beginning of the day, which in Jewish law is the night before. Lefichach, therefore, meine balayla milil shisha asar b'Nisan, you begin to count the night of the 16th of Nisan, as we do today. Second night of Pesach, we count the omer. Shachach v'leimana balayla meine bayom. If you forgot, you didn't count by day. By night, you can count by day. Ve'ein meinin ela me'umad v'imana meyushav yatsa. Really, you shouldn't only count while you're standing. If you count it while you're sitting, it's okay. Mitzvah zu al kol ish mi Yisrael u'b'chol makom u'b'chol zman. This mitzvah applies to every Jew, all places and all times. V'nashim v'avadim p'turim mimena, but women and slaves are exempt from it. V'tzarich levarich b'chol laila, and every night you make a blessing, because every night is a new mitzvah. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kitshonu b'mitzvayso v'tzivanu al sfiras ha'omer, koidem sheyispar. You make that blessing before you count. Mana v'lei beirach, if you counted without making a blessing, yotza ve'einei chayzeru mevarich, you have fulfilled your obligation, no need to make a new blessing. See, in the Rambam, it's just 4 laws for this whole thing. In halacha and Jewish law, it becomes a huge chapter in Shulchan Aruch, all the details about counting the omer, but the Rambam is very straightforward. Count by night. If you missed it, count by day. Make a blessing. It's a mitzvah for every single Jew at all times.